Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As the Israeli war on Gaza enters its 25th day, there are multiple new developments every single day. And if we were to record a video on a daily basis, it wouldn't be enough to catch all of the developments that are happening on the ground inside Israel and Palestine and outside of it. In my last video, I gave you some brief details about what happened the prior days, and what I'm going to do in this video is give you some details about the latest events in the past few days in the war in Gaza, a bit of stats, the countries involved, the warnings, and what's potentially to come. So I'll start with the statistics. So far, there have been around 9,000 civilian casualties in Gaza. Over 42% of them are children under the age of 18. Most of them are under 10, and many of them are infants between the ages of 0 to 7 years old. So in terms of humanitarian crisis, it's absolutely catastrophical in Gaza. So you have almost 9,000 casualties, over 42% children, others mostly women and elderly, and the other men are civilians, the vast majority of them. Israel has caused over 20,000 injuries, many of them severe. Over 2,000 people are still under the rubble. Israel has totally annihilated over 800 Palestinian families, all of them completely gone because of indiscriminate and deliberate Israeli punishment of the civilians in Gaza. 1.5 million of the people in Gaza are now dispossessed and have no shelter. They have no water, no electricity, nothing at all. Hardly any aid is going in. So far there have been just over 70 trucks full of aid in 25 days for a city that basically needed 500 trucks on a daily basis. So people have no shelter, no place is safe. Neither the north nor the south, east, west, every single part is being bombarded. Although Israel said that it's primarily focusing on the north of Gaza, southern Gaza has been attacked. Many of the places that were attacked were holding refugees. And Israel has so far attacked hospitals, civil society buildings, houses, mosques, churches, bakeries, markets. Every single building that is required for an essential day-to-day life has been bombed. They also cut off the telecommunications on Gaza, so they cannot communicate with the external world after their small invasions here and there. And the Palestinians are basically trying different methods to communicate with the external world. There was a trend on X, previously Twitter, Starlink for Gaza, that Elon Musk has responded to, and he said that he is going to open Starlink for the internationally recognized humanitarian bodies or organizations working in Gaza. It has received a lot of criticism from Israel because, they don't want them to have anything, no water, no food, no communications, nothing, so that they can get on with their job, more efficiently, so they can wipe out the population, do the ethnic cleansing, commit the genocide with any repercussions or anything of the sort. They don't want any hassle doing their job, doing their self-defense moral job, because they're the most moral army in the world, don't forget. So these are the statistics, very hard, unfortunately, and the image that come out of Gaza, for those who are able to see them, are even harsher. I myself, I need to refrain from seeing the images of bodies of infants, of babies under the rubble, being taken out, families, misery, nothing basically. It's an absolute disaster what's happening in Gaza, and almost mainstream Western media is concerned about is basically whitewashing Israeli crimes and making them look like a necessity and like they're fighting these, evil terrorists in Gaza, whereas the fact of the matter is the people being punished are the civilians. Israel has hardly attacked any infrastructure belonging to Palestinian resistance movements. All of the tunnels are intact. They claim that they released a hostage just yesterday, but there have been many suspicions raised over this release because in the initial list of prisoners or hostages that were missing, this person was not there. So it was added on the day that she or Israel claimed that she has been freed. And the Hamas, the Izzuddin al-Qassam, the military wing of Hamas spokesperson, has denied that any of their captives have been freed. However, he did say that other organizations and individuals, they also have prisoners, so it could be one of them, but however, nothing was confirmed. Mostly it was due to Hamas releasing a video of three Israeli women prisoners in Gaza, where they basically laid into Benjamin Netanyahu and they were shouting at him and asking for the release and a prisoner swap, and for them to basically get out of there. So usually when Israel gets news that basically threaten its image or the public opinion or whatever, they always have something in hand to release to counter it, similar to what they did with Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. They immediately confirmed that they basically bombed the place, and they said, we attacked. Their spokesperson, Hanania Naftali, posted on Twitter that basically that they confirmed the bombing, but they deleted it very quickly. Almost immediately after that, they had a fabricated video that was posted to the world and was welcomed by mainstream media. And it was basically a he said, she said story rather than a JDAM Israeli bomb, for example, deliberately bombing a hospital. So that was the case with this particular hostage. There have been multiple other developments. I think the most significant one was the freed two hostages that Hamas released for humanitarian purposes, the older women. One of them is called Yocheved Lifshitz. And the fact that Israel refused to take them beforehand, so Hamas offered to release them on humanitarian basis, but Israel refused to accept them because to them they didn't want to, give Hamas a good image that they are humanitarian or that they're humans or whatever. They needed to be deemed as this, demon, and they're promoting them as ISIS and whatnot. However, after a week, with Egyptian Qatari support, they have been released to Egypt. After they were released to Egypt, and the famous video that went viral of the woman shaking hands with one of Izzuddin al-Qassam members and saying shalom to him in Hebrew, peace, it was immediately obviously spinned in the media, but no one really paid attention to all of the details that were spoken about in the press conference that followed when she landed in Israel. Basically, her and her family, they insisted on basically giving a press conference where she would reveal everything that happened to her. Basically, some people took snippets. However, not all of them gave the whole picture and the highlights. I luckily was watching this live. The highlights of that press conference included sentences such as, obviously, the kidnapping was horrific, that she was taken on a motorbike, that she was beaten with a stick by the people who basically took her as a prisoner to Gaza. She went into these massive tunnels. That's the kind of traumatic part. But then she describes what seemed like a good interaction that she had with the fighters that were holding her and taking care of her, basically. She said that she was reassured when she reached by the men who held her, as a prisoner, that they told her, we're Muslims, we won't attack you, we believe in the Quran, you're here as a guest, we're not here to harm you. She said that they fed them, that they took good care of them, they gave them medical care, there was a doctor checking in on them, they gave them medicines on a regular basis, that they were nice, kind, and friendly. That obviously didn't come out a lot in the media. And that basically she criticized the mass killing that Israel went on following that, describing how many people Israel killed. And also that her captives, when they were holding her with a group of other Israeli prisoners, that Israel attacked them 3 times. They bombed them directly, which resonates with other witnesses who came out to multiple Israeli news networks. Khan, I think Channel 13, one radio show, where they confirmed that most civilian deaths in Israel happened because of shelling from the Israeli army on them while they were held as hostages with the Palestinians. So basically, this was what Israel was worried about, and it was described in multiple Israeli media outlets online as they called it in Hebrew "pigua hasbara," which is like a PR attack on Israel's image, simply because this person went out and said about her general interaction with these people and said the truth alongside the other people and what they said. So when you combine these witnesses who actually went through what happened on the 7th of October, you get a pretty different image from what we're getting from the Israeli officials, from the IDF, and from mainstream media in Israel and in most Western countries, at least US, UK, Europe, and other Western countries that are aligned with Israel. So that was like a bombshell to Israel. And obviously things didn't stop then. There were developments on every single day. There was a massive delay in the ground entry to Gaza. There were multiple entries. Now they actually went into Gaza a couple of miles from multiple sides basically, and they're suffering really heavy casualties. Like today, the Israeli defense minister said that today was one of the worst days in terms of casualties, and this also was confirmed by the Abu Ubaidah, the Hamas military wing spokesperson. He said that they basically demolished 22 Israeli tanks and armored vehicles, and basically there were many casualties on the Israeli side. Israel, on the other hand, continued the indiscriminate genocide. Basically, today was in Jabalia refugee camp. This is one of the most heavily populated refugee camps in Gaza. One airstrike basically killed approximately 400 people, and one reporter that was at the scene, he said there are no injured people, all of them are dead. And we have seen horrific images of children being taken out of the rubble, and if anyone wants to view live images, even though they're really, really hard to see, very difficult to see, they're on multiple platforms, online, on X, Twitter, and on some other platforms as well. Times of Gaza usually gives a lot of images that are really, really difficult and hard to see. On the northern front, there is a very anticipated speech from Hezbollah's Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah. He is due to speak on Friday. He hasn't spoken since this war began, despite the fact that he had meetings with what's called as the Circle of Resistance, basically, in this war. And it's very much anticipated because some analysts think that he will be declaring something important, either a confirmation of full entry to the battle or a clarification as to what Hezbollah and Lebanon in general stance in this war is. To elaborate on that, I mean, Lebanon has been actively in the war, albeit not in a full-scale manner, since the beginning. Because when Hamas launched the attack, the main leader who announced it, Mohammed al-Taifi, asked other people to join in. So it was like a call, basically. So Hezbollah have attacked multiple Israeli locations alongside the Israeli-Lebanese border, and they have made several successful infiltrations into the Israeli territories in the northern of historical occupied Palestine. Israel has also evacuated approximately 200,000 settlers from its borders with Lebanon, basically places near the border about 5 kilometers in range. So combined with the people evacuated from the south, you get about 400,000 in total. So they're filling up the hotels. Many of them are leaving the country. Some people were obviously evacuated by airplanes or foreign military airplanes at the beginning of the war, and also some people left by the sea. One major announcement that happened today was an official confirmation from the Yemeni defense minister, confirming that Yemen has officially entered the war, and that today's ballistic missile attacks from Yemen to Israel was the third attack, basically. We have heard several reports previously of America intercepting some of their rockets, taking them down, basically, from areas closer to Yemen. They have anti-missile systems over there, and Israel for the first time used a more advanced anti-missile system. Today there have been no confirmations as to where they landed, but multiple reports say that they landed in the south of Israel. So we have multiple fronts that are very active. The south, obviously, next to Gaza, the north, and the far south of Israel, alongside other points that are being targeted by the groups fighting Israel, basically. Now, in terms of where it's going, it doesn't seem like we're heading towards any ceasefire, because from what you hear from US officials, and these are the most important people to listen to because they run the show, if America tomorrow asks Israel to stop the war or commit to a ceasefire, Israel will listen, because everything is coming from America. As a matter of fact, since day one, Israelis called America immediately. They were basically almost running the show. And this is similar to what happened with the war in Lebanon, where there was an inquiry after the war, and many people in the army, basically, they were saying, we weren't knowing what to do. We did not know what to do. You know, one day they'll tell us go to a certain direction, the other day it's a different story. We felt like there was no organization and no clear plan. And lots of analysts at the time said that it was basically America making the orders and taking into consideration its strategic relations with Iran and how much they want to press on them, etc. So officially now we have another country involved, which is Yemen. Other groups like some of the Iraqi militias, they have obviously carried out attacks against multiple American bases in Iraq and Syria, and obviously Lebanon is involved as well. And why? The reason I said that we're not looking, I'm not predicting that we will reach a ceasefire or de-escalation anytime soon, because like I said, the Americans are not looking to de-escalate. I mean, when we listen to Joe Biden and Blinken, they are basically, they already resisted and vetoed 2 ceasefire calls in the Security Council, which were promoted basically and done by Russia. Most countries in the world are for a ceasefire. Very small fraction amount of countries are against a ceasefire, funny enough, including some European countries. And we're not looking for a de-escalation. And a couple of people, one of them, I was really interested in listening to some of the previous American colonels, basically. One of them is called Douglas MacGregor. He said a couple of interesting things in a few interviews, and he gave his analysis. Now, this guy's a firm Israeli ally, basically. He worked with the Israelis. He's a fan of Israel. And he buys most of the Israeli rhetoric. However, he is looking at it from a strategic point of view. And the way he's viewing things is that America and what it's doing in Palestine, similarly to what it's doing with Ukraine, is basically steering problems and increasing the likelihood of a regional escalation that could potentially lead to a much larger war. He said that they're not taking into consideration the vibes surrounding Israel at the moment in the Arab countries and the Muslim countries. That was obviously translated when Yemen actually officially entered the war. Hezbollah is keeping the tensions high, albeit, on low fire in Lebanon in the meantime, next to the Lebanese borders. But all of that, according to his analysis of things, could potentially escalate, and it could reach a level where they wouldn't be able to save Israel any longer. So from his perspective, the way that America is basically treating this is as if it's somehow an inconceivable, unbeatable global superpower with no competition in the world. Whereas the fact of the matter is you have global powers nowadays, and you have other countries that have more sophisticated armies, and people are more aware, and the public opinion isn't as easily manipulated as it was even just 20 years back, let alone 30, 40, and 50 years back. So anyone basically thinking that they could go ahead on the same conditions that they used to go to wars 20, 30, and 50 years ago are completely delusional. And one sentence that he said actually really resonated with me. He said something along the lines of, the US is basically suffering from a chronic, massive arrogance symptom, basically, where they think that they still rule everything in the world, where the fact of the matter is, it's no longer the case. And all of that is dragging the region to much more difficult situations and much harder days to come. And what we've seen so far, although we have been here for about a month since this war began, would be very small in comparison to what could happen. Because not only you're annoying the direct people involved in this conflict, you're really annoying traditional strategic partners for America and even Israel, primarily Egypt. Like, Egypt was a strategic partner for Israel for ever since Camp David, basically, the peace treaty, for about 50 years now. And Israel and its plans to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from Gaza, I think some people don't realize that. When the first Nakba happened, it was an implementation of a plan called Plan Dalet that I spoke about in some of my previous videos. That plan wasn't completely finished. It was just a strategic move back then to put a halt of the plan and not completely action all of it, and keep some of the Palestinians inside Israeli territories for multiple reasons. Some of them are due to manpower, industry, all sorts of things. There was another plan that many Israeli leaders spoke about in the 50s and 60s of the continuation of the ethnic cleansing. And in one of these drafts was basically something that Israeli press revealed actually a few days ago. But this was known to the Egyptians and some people involved previously, to completely get rid of Palestinians in Gaza. So ever since the war began, Israel immediately put pressure on Egypt to accept them. And obviously the Egyptians rejected point blank, but now they're putting even more pressure. So the gas that's going to Gaza, that Israel basically stopped from Gaza, it also supplies Egypt. And they basically cut the supply to Egypt. Egypt used to use some of this gas domestically and used to export some of it out to Europe after getting it from Israel. Now that stopped, which means some Egyptian locations get more than 1 hour of electricity a day. Some people are talking 2 to 4 hours. So it's not only diplomatic pressure, they're actually putting pressure actively by doing that. And recently they've re-escalated the tensions with Egypt to a level where Egypt has its army on the highest alert. So about a week ago there was something called I'm not sure how you would translate into English, but basically a main military check by the leader of the armed forces, which is basically the Egyptian president, where basically they confirm that the army is ready to go to war at any given point. Some estimate around 100,000 Egyptian soldiers are now next to the Palestinian and Israeli borders. There have been multiple, threats between the lines from multiple leaders in the Egyptian army. So that could escalate in any given moment. Obviously, Israel attacked one of their locations in Rafah and apologized for it. There have been 2 other bombings in Egypt ever since. And things could escalate very quickly. You have a much different tone from Turkey as well. Like the Turkish president changed his stance drastically from the beginning of the war. He was initially more towards, okay, let's settle things down. He was looking to visit Israel and meet the Israeli president, Yitzhak Herzog. He canceled that. Israel withdrew all of its staff from Turkey. And during the celebrations in Turkiye's Centurion, basically, 100th anniversary, he basically said some really, really harsh things about Israel, that it's looking to view Israel as a war criminal and work towards it. And in a couple of other previous, basically, statements he made, he said that we're politically and militarily willing to intervene for the Palestinian side. He rejected the notion that Hamas was a terrorist organization. He said they're freedom fighters, basically, mujahideen defending their lands. He heavily criticized the Western hypocrisy when it comes to Palestine, rightfully so, and basically criticized them for turning a blind eye to the genocide in Gaza, whereas they were very quick to condemn what was happening in Ukraine and support the Ukrainians with whatever they needed. So the tensions are very, very, very high. And from what you hear from Israeli officials, although there's a difference between the Israeli government and, what some people at least in the Israeli street are asking for, the Israeli government and the war cabinet, they're pushing with full force. So Netanyahu, a few days back, he said his main aim is as follows: to demolish Hamas. That's number one. That's his main aim. The second one is to attempt to release as many Israeli prisoners as possible. That went out concurrently with reports that elite Israeli forces combined with elite American forces wanted to attack Gaza and go into the tunnels and basically attack them with nerve gas and other sorts of chemical weapons and basically kill all of the hostages alongside whoever it is from the Palestinians that are in there. Some people obviously automatically deny that from Israel, but the fact of the matter is, from witness statements and testimonials given about the attacks on the 7th of October and what followed, they clearly show that Israel has no regard towards its hostages, prisoners in Gaza. So far, the Palestinians confirmed that over 50 of them were killed because of Israeli airstrikes. They even published some videos of the people who were there before, and they confirmed that they basically died or were killed because of Israeli airstrikes. And much of the pressure that's on the Israeli government is coming from the families of those missing in Gaza. They basically want the Israeli government to have a prisoner swap with the Palestinians, because at the end of the day, they took prisoners to release the Palestinian prisoners. There are 6,000 in Israeli prisons. Now it's even more because they're on a massive rampage, by the way, in the West Bank. And, inside Israel, the situation is not great, and I'll get to that in 1 second. But they basically want to release them, and Hamas told them multiple times that we were willing to have an immediate prisoner exchange, basically. But Israel is resisting. To them, they're just looking to seek revenge. This is how I view it, really. I mean, understandably, any country would want to retaliate if it's attacked, but what Israel is doing doesn't seem really anything but capital punishment for Gaza, and literally an implementation of a second Nakba against the Palestinians. They're actively trying to push for it and make it go ahead. Like 1.5 million out of 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza are now refugees in a refugee camp. So that's catastrophic. So the vast majority of them don't have anywhere to go. And obviously Egypt is aware of it, and they know that once they get into Gaza, Israel won't let them back, because, Israel has a history of not letting people back in once they leave, especially Palestinians. So it's very, very tense. I mean, in the West Bank, people focused on Gaza because, understandably, it's a complete catastrophe and it's a genocide what's happening in Gaza. But in the West Bank, there have been over 110 people killed in cold blood, mostly by settlers. I've seen videos published of people working in their fields, It's the olive season now, so people are harvesting, getting shot for no reason. A worker that was getting, gas or whatever, shot. Children being shot left, right, and center. People can't leave their homes. Sympathy with Gaza is very limited in the West Bank by the PA. So it's really tense. It's very difficult, and it's even worse in Israel for Palestinians in Israel or the 1948 occupied territories. Like from people I'm speaking with, my family and everyone there, no one is allowed to say one word. So even if you show, a like can get you in prison, sympathy can get you in prison, saying anything against the war can get you in prison, putting a verse of the Quran can get you in prison. Anything very small can get you in prison immediately. I've heard of some people who were also financially punished for showing sympathy, like things to do with loans, financial problems, deactivation of bank accounts. And there are talks of forcing them out of the country and taking away their Israeli passports and identity. So you're talking about almost an Orwellian state, basically. Military rule back again on the population, but particularly the Arab Palestinian minority inside of Israel, and that's also not being spoken about. Now, I understand, obviously you have some measures when there's a war, but to a certain extent, when people stop being able to express how they feel or sympathize or what have you, you're talking about a completely different state. You're talking about something worse than apartheid now, because you simply can't talk. And there are many questions are being raised now, like what's going to happen when this ends then? If they're going to get rid of Gaza, for example, and finish their work with Gaza, what are they going to do to the West Bank? And what are they going to do to the Palestinians of Israel, inside of Israel? Especially when they have, unlimited backing, full support and legitimization from the main country that's important to Israel, which is America. But nonetheless, obviously, the EU as well, European countries too. So it doesn't look very promising from many sides. And a lot of it is down to Benjamin Netanyahu, because Netanyahu, some people in Israel say, and I'm talking, Israeli Zionists as well, that he'll basically sell his mother to save himself. And from what many observers are seeing, and my stance, obviously, I'm with the people who are more oppressed. I don't care who they are, what their color is, where they come from. I just happen to be Palestinian, born in Israel, seeing the conflict, and I'll stick with the side that's more oppressed. That's my priority. It doesn't matter where it is. It just happens to be my fate. So I absolutely have all of my sympathy with the Palestinian people, because they are the oppressed people. They are the people under occupation. They are the people who are being killed, ethnically cleansed, all of that. But many people, and if it was the opposite side, I would be sticking with the other side. No questions asked. I don't care where it is. It's a moral principle to me. And I don't practice double standards with my morals like many people do in many conflicts. So if it was a Muslim country or an Arab country doing that to any other minority, I would be completely against what's being done and fully supporting that minority against my country. It's a matter of principles and morals. And what we're witnessing nowadays is immorality, double standards, and hypocrisy. That's very, very commonly linked with racism and supremacy. People think they have a moral high ground, very arrogant. And they think that, they can stick with Israel no matter what, because, it's standing against the Arabs, and it's normal for you to stand with Israel or with any occupying power against minorities in Muslim and Arab countries somehow. And other parts of the world as well, like Latin America or East Asia. But going back to Netanyahu, many people in Israel are saying that, Jews, Zionist Israelis who are concerned about Israel as a country, who don't want to see Israel in the way that it is, he knows that he's ending after this. So a lot of what's happening is to save his character, because he doesn't want to go anywhere. You're talking about a megalomaniac, psychopath, Benjamin Netanyahu. He took Israel to 6 unnecessary elections, spending billions of taxpayers' money, just because he is insisting on being on the Likud, his party's leadership. So many other, despite having many corruption charges and whatnot, so people on the other side were really, wary of him, and they didn't want him. They didn't want any government with him. That's why they had very small majority governments, and some of them broke out, and then you had to do a re-election, etc. So you're talking about a guy who'd sell anyone for his own selfish reasons. And what they're seeing is that he's actually selling the country to try and save himself. And this is where we could potentially be headed to, a complete annihilation if this persists, because the guy is not looking at Israel's interest, despite obviously my reservations on Israel as a state in general, you know, and how it is, how it was established and whatever. But the guy isn't considering what's good for Israel in the long run. Him and his cabinet, they have one thing and one thing only in mind, is just to demolish Hamas. A task that is, we don't want to say, but almost impossible, because they have tried that many times. You're talking about a movement that is deep-rooted, and it's there for a reason. It's because the Palestinians, especially in Gaza and in the more oppressed locations, have seen no other alternative. And people who know the Palestinian-Israeli conflict well know that very well. There has been no alternative. You have, on the other hand, you know, in opposition to Hamas, for example, the PLO, they have been negotiating and taking the non-violent, you know, diplomatic route with Israel for 30 years. Look at what we've seen in the West Bank. Quadrupling plus many more, you know, of settlements in the West Bank, more land grabbing, the continuation of an apartheid regime, basically martial law, continued killing, continued oppression, killing, land grabbing, everything on a daily basis, checkpoints, restriction of movement, all of that. So the people in these areas, when they see like that's the alternative to us actually fighting Israel and actually trying to get whatever we can from this, this is how these people think, because you're giving them no alternative. Obviously, you know, here in Western media, all they're concerned about is demonization and fear-mongering and scaring people with this whole terrorism and demonizing Palestinians basically and standing on Israel's side. But the fact of the matter is, it's a much, much deeper thing. And if you don't want to know what's happening, you basically listen to the mainstream media. You listen to Sky News and BBC and Piers Morgan and all of these people to not get an idea of what's actually happening, because all they're concerned about is whitewashing Israeli crimes and demonizing Palestinians. That's what they're concerned about. And then they'll tell you, oh yeah, we're for a humanitarian pause or whatever, and they turn a blind eye to the devastating catastrophe, genocide that the Palestinians are going through. Combining all of that, and you know, with lots of things being anticipated in the next coming days, we're potentially seeing further escalation, because since the last time I spoke with you, it has escalated much further. So Israel actually started to go in, and there were threats from Iran previously that if you go in, we'll intervene. There has been a change of tone here and there. The attacks in the north were very limited, and you know, they also said if there's a risk for Gaza, we're going to enter potentially for full force. There is an expected speech from Hassan Nasrallah on Friday, and we'll wait and see what he has to say. But all of that is not signaling that it's going anywhere, you know, quiet in the near future. And I will give you another update in my coming video in the next few days, and give my take and give you the latest updates. I hope you enjoyed this video and I helped you somehow and gave you a piece of new information, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Take care.